I'm glad to be able to chat with you a little bit about selling to developers. It's a topic that I feel passionate about because I love working with developers. I am a developer, and I love making developers' lives better. And that's one of the things that I most enjoy about my current startup, Honey Badger, is that I can actually spend my days making your days better. So I love it, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you about that. So if you are a developer, you probably recognize this guy. If you don't recognize his picture, you recognize his name. This is Larry Wall, the inventor of the Perl programming language. And many of us owe a lot of what we do to what he has done. And I want to share with you this quote because a lot of us, once we find this quote, we identify with it, and it kind of guides us as who we are and who we want to be. The quote, of course, is that a great programmer is lazy, impatient, and has hubris. So if you're looking from the outside in, if you're not a developer, you might look at this list of attributes and be like, I'm not so sure that's a great thing. But if you have accepted this lifestyle, if you embrace your developerness, you realize over time that these characteristics and attributes are actually great. So we're going to talk about how you can appeal to these three different characteristics of developers while you're trying to sell to them. Now, first, I want to dispel a myth that a lot of people have, and that is developers don't buy things. Developers buy things. All right, so that's just a myth. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we can take advantage of the fact that, in fact, they do buy things and how we can sell to them. So first, let's take a look at laziness. If you're a developer and you have had the experience of having a new project or a new feature, you may recall that one of the first things that you did as you thought about this project or this feature is you thought, I wonder if someone's already done the work for me. Anybody had that experience? Of course, we've all had that experience because we're all lazy. And lazy in a good way. Laziness in this case is, has someone done this work already for me? Has someone already invented this wheel? Do I really have to reinvent it? Or can I just plug in someone else's thing and just go hang out on Reddit for a while? The way that you can sell to this laziness attribute for developers is you have to be findable, right? So what happens is a developer's like, okay, I've got this problem. I need to validate zip codes, all right? Let's just say I've got a client request. They're going to type in a zip code, and I want to make sure that it's actual a valid zip code for the state that they're in, right? So you think, okay, how can I do this? Well, I can go look up a chart of zip codes somewhere, or maybe I can call an API. So you Google for zip code validator, right? Easy as pie, right? This is not rocket science. You need to be discoverable for that. Right? So if you're thinking about what your product is that you want to sell to developers, first, they have to be able to find you. But the way they find you, of course, is by you selling your benefits to them. We've heard many times that you should sell benefits, not features. But for developers, the trick is once you get them, once you hook them, once they've read your headline and they think, okay, this could work for me, this might be something that I could use, then you need to sell them on the features. Developers are not satisfied just with a list of benefits because anybody can make up a list of benefits. I mean, sure, yeah, of course you're going to do everything I need you to do. Prove it. And that's where all the features come in. You need to show in exacting detail exactly how your solution solves the problem they have. Now, my experience has been with honeybadger.io, which is where we sell a monitoring service to Rails developers, and also with railskits.com, where I sell ready-made code to Rails developers. So my comments are informed from my experience selling to people on the open source stack and specifically Ruby people. So some of these things may not apply if you're trying to sell like .NET components. I can't really help you with that. But I can just tell you from my experience, things that I run into many, many, many times selling to developers and some of these tricks. So your mileage may vary is basically a short way of saying that. A developer wants to know, is this thing that looks like it could solve my problem, is it going to solve my problem? And how can I find out in as little time as possible because I'm lazy? This chart is a chart of my Wistia stats. Wistia is a video hosting service. My Wistia stats for the video that you can see if you go to railskits.com and look at my recurring billing component that you can buy. When I looked at this to get ready for this talk, because I don't look at the stats very often, frankly, I was surprised. Because that video on that page is 6 minutes long. That's a ridiculously long video. I don't watch 6-minute videos. But this video, it works. And that's why it's there, and that's why it's 6 minutes long. What is in this 6-minute video? What I do is I take the code as you would download it. After you get it from me, get a zip file, you can open it up. And so I take that as a customer and I open it up in a text editor and I start walking through exactly the steps that you would take to use the code that I just sold you, that hopefully you're about to buy, and I tell you exactly how you can use it. You can see it. Now you can't see all of it, obviously, and it's like in this tiny little window, so you can't just copy it. It is open source, you do get the full thing. But you can see exactly how it is supposed to work in 6 minutes worth of that. And this chart shows how much that video gets watched. It's ridiculous. 393 loads, so people that loaded that section of the site that had that video, 97% play rate. 15.5 hours of people watching this 6-minute video. 46% engagement. That's pretty cool. Now I don't have 46% conversion on sales, obviously, but it shows you that developers want as much information as possible once they think that your solution might be an appropriate solution for them. So what does that mean for you? It could mean a 6-minute video where you show everything. It could mean that you produce a heck of a lot of documentation. If you're building like a developer component like Rails kits, you want to provide a lot of documentation down to the method level, because I guarantee you developers want to know down to the method level, what does this component look like? What is the signature? Is this code really good? And how can I tell that if I can't see it? Well, documentation is the next best proxy, right? If you're selling a service like Honey Badger, you might find that the documentation that you can provide about every little feature on every little aspect of your application answers some developer's question about, will this work for me? If you go to honeybadger.io and you load the homepage and you ignore the headline, which we need to improve, and you scroll down a bit, and you scroll down a bit, and you scroll down a bit more, and a bit more, we just throw out a whole bunch of information at you, which on a consumer site would not be so great, but in our case, works really well. Bonus points, you have all this content out there, you're more discoverable. So it's kind of a virtuous loop. Okay, impatience. Developers at your site, he's somewhat convinced that what you have is good for him or her. How does this person know for sure? So I'll give you an example back to this API validation thing. I'll talk about it a little bit because this happened to me last week. I had a client ask me for API validation, a zip code validation, and I went to go look for an API. So I went to Google and I said zip code validator, and the first 3 results were USPS. Okay, went to the website. It's ridiculous. I mean, I couldn't even find what I was looking for. Went back. UPS was number 2. Click through there. I've got to register to see what your API looks like. Not going to do it. Backed up. 3rd result, smartystreets.com. Click through. There's a box on the home page. Type in your address here and we'll validate it. Click the button and it shows me the results that I want. Click below that and I see the API. Sold. So I know within 2 minutes that this particular site has what I need, and now it's just a matter of, am I going to buy it or not? So common questions in this phase is, how long is it going to take for me to try this? I'm a busy person. I've got things to do. I don't even know if you're going to work for me yet. I don't want to invest my afternoon in finding out. I want to know right now. And the number 2 thing is, do I need to get permission? And by that I mean, this brings up, in our case, the credit card form on a SaaS site. There's a great podcast episode about that. We spent 30 minutes talking about just this very thing. If you sign up for Honey Badger, you'll see that we do not ask for a credit card up front. And that is a decision that we consciously made because we know that we are selling, in many cases, to a developer who is on a team and he does not hold a credit card. And the last thing we want to do is to have that developer back up and go to one of our competitors who has a free service or a free trial, or won't put that roadblock in his face. So for us, the best thing for us to do to get people in as fast as possible is not to ask for that credit card up front. It may not be that for your case. But it just goes to, is this going to work for me? How can I find out with as little effort as possible? Hubris. And this is where I think a lot of people get caught up on the 3 virtues. Because we don't usually think hubris is a great thing. But in fact, as entrepreneurs and developers, hubris is what allows us to actually take that leap. That, you know what? I can build that better. I can solve this problem. I can actually do that. And developers have plenty of this because in front of them is a world full of problems and they got the hammer. When a developer is looking at your site and he's thinking, wow, I could spend, in the case of Rails kits, $250, or I could just build this myself. It's not complicated. I'll just build it myself. And so they ask themselves, how long would it take for me to build this myself? I bet I could just throw that out there in a weekend. I mean, we've all thought this, right? All developers think this. I guarantee it. What you need to do is convince that developer that, surprise, your time is actually worth money. And I don't know what the deal is with developers, but I will guarantee you that just about every developer ever has at one point valued his time at almost zero, if not zero. And many developers out there right now still continue to value their time at zero. I'm going to spend $250? No, I don't think so. I'm going to spend 2 weeks building my own. And that's just lunacy when you think about it from an economic standpoint, but developers aren't economists, so there you go. So what you need to do is convince that developer, you know what, this $250 is chump change compared to the 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks that you might spend trying to solve the same problem. And then they're like, oh, okay, I'll buy that. So when you're thinking about how do I convince some developer after he's shown up on my site to actually plunk down the change, remember, that person is probably valuing their time a lot less than they should. So you need to educate them on, number one, their time is worth some money. And number two, they're underestimating how much time you spent on it. Because you've packaged it up nicely, they have no idea how many nights, weekends, and months you spent, and they have this skewed perspective. And so you need to convince them, by the way, this is going to take you a month. Don't bother, just give me the money. So if you remember these three things, the laziness, the impatience, and the hubris of all great and not so great developers, you'll be able to target their psychology perfectly to be able to sell to them. My slides are there. If you want to look up some more resources, some great talks from last year's Bacon Biz, Marc-Andre talks about your sales page should just slay objections, and that's great, especially in this case with developers. And also Sarah May at this year's Mountain West Ruby Conference talked about how developers select open source packages to use in their own projects. Fantastic. I'm looking at how developers look at this kind of thing. So check those out. It's there on the link if you want to go.